Hi folks, Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car or your truck or going along in public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, look, in the world of consumerism and worker consumer and all this sort of thing, the West, most of the West and other parts of the world are fine. They can everybody can, intermingle to some degree at least. But in the case of devout Islam in particular, then that's not really possible. It doesn't really work that way. And the intermingling and the idea that people will set religion aside and will just become worker consumers, that to some extent works outside of Islam, but not within Islam. Not within most of Islam. Now, if you look at sort of the number of people who are devout in the Muslim faith, then there's a very high proportion of devout devotees, if you will, and it's very much a way of life rather than just simply where you go to church on Sunday or something like that. It's very much a way of life, and it's also where those that are not adherents or not devout adherents even to the faith, the Islamic faith, are viewed with suspicion, if not outright hostility, and they're infidels and they're not believers in the one prophet, this sort of thing. So now, if you're looking at creating a world of a one world where everyone is a merged consumer worker, the one world government, the one world sort of, and really religion has no place in that sort of world, then what do you do when you've got 1 billion plus devoted adherents? What can you do with them? They're don't really fit into anything. So you have to somehow use them in some way that's advantageous to the globalist project. Okay, so now going back many years, I'm a young guy, not long. I'm already a well-travelled, frequent traveller, frequent flyer, but I'm a young guy, mid-20s at this point, and because I'm quite junior in the overall scheme of things, they always send me in cattle class and staying in 2.5-star, 3-star hotels. Some of them really shitty too. I noticed whenever I travelled with one of my bosses, they would travel in the first class and they'd get the 5-star hotel. Used to really annoy me, by the way. Anyway, so I got upgraded to business class one time. And again, I'm about 25, 26, somewhere around there. And I've got many of the naiveties that someone of that age has. Although, again, I've been traveling pretty solid for a couple of years at this point. So my horizons have been substantially broadened to what they otherwise would have been. So I get sat next to a guy, and as I recall, he was an academic of some sociology in some respect, and he'd been seconded to the US Immigration Department or Department of Immigration. And so, being an Australian and a young guy, he sort of treated me as being irrelevant, and he spoke he's probably a little bit casual with some of the things he spoke about. And I've almost forgotten about this, but I was in general in rapture. I'm sitting next to this PhD from America, from Harvard, and he's got some heavyweight job in the public service. And I was, oh, wow, here's my chance to learn something from such a font of knowledge. When I think back of the guy now, he was just an ideological flunky. But at the time, at my age, I said, oh, well. And so he was telling me or talking about this thing about Islam. What do you do about Islam? Particularly because most of the Islamic society are either very tribal or very peasant. So you've got a small elite, I don't know, the Saudi royal family or something. You've got a small elite, but the tribal peasant thing is look at places like Bangladesh and Pakistan, shot through with gazillions of peasants, and these are very simple people. With the inbreeding, you've got masses of deformities, Indonesia and all that sort of stuff. But there are a lot of Muslims around the world, and how can they be made useful to the New World Order? And this is what this guy was talking about. So he had this idea, and it was, I'm sure, conceptual, and I don't know how far it had got along with the think tanks. But he said, "Look, what we're going to do is we're going to move, hundreds of millions of Muslims into the West, and within 1 or 2 generations, they'll be de-radicalized. They won't follow Islam anymore. They'll become, not necessarily Christians, but they'll become sort of, religion won't mean anything to them. It will make a religion, in effect, irrelevant, or Islamic religion he was talking about here. And this will then turn them into being just faithless, godless worker consumers, which is what we want." That was, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of where he was going with this. And so the solution to Islam was to just bring these people into the West in large numbers. That would de-radicalize them, as in, again, just have them as faithless worker consumers without any religious faith of any particular description. Sure, they may, go to the mosque once a month or something, or once a year, or maybe Ramadan or something. But otherwise, that religion will be irrelevant to their day-to-day existence, and so they'll become more Western than or as Western as the Westerners are, which are were already at that time. The Christian observance of Christian religion was in sharp decline at that point. So this was his prescription. Now, thinking back to the way he was talking about it, he wasn't some outlier here. He was reflecting the views of those around him and discussions that were going on at the time at the highest levels of the United States government, or public service at least, and I assume government as well. And so this was the plan. The plan. This was one of the ways that was being discussed of making Islam, bringing it to heel as being part of the globalist project, because as long as it stayed a devout Islamic thing, it was no good to the globalist project. Not that I understood there was a globalist project at the time, but I look back now and realize that's what the guy was talking about. So what happened? Because the first part of this plan seems to have taken place, bringing in surprisingly large numbers of Muslims into the West. I mean, why would you do that? They don't integrate. They don't want to integrate. They still have cousins marrying each other with a very high proportion of deformities at birth, because a deformed person or a handicapped person is under the direct protection of Allah. You can't harm them, so you can't engage in sort of euthanasia. If you do harm them, then you'll be damned forever. So this is why so many of these sort of deformed creatures exist. And if they die naturally, then that's it. That's Allah's will. But so they're a huge drag on they consume vast amounts of welfare. They're very militant, armed mobs running around, all this sort of stuff. So they're hardly desirable immigrants. So the first part of the plan, I'm assuming, therefore, going back to this conversation, is that let's bring these people into the West, these tribal, devout peasants, bring them into the West, and that'll de-radicalize, that'll get them away from Islam, and then we'll have this huge coterie of faithless erstwhile Islamic people that we can then send back to the Islamic countries, and that'll do so this was the wider thing. Now, has that come to pass? Well, they did the first thing. They brought in vast numbers of Islamic illiterate Islamic peasants. That was done, but they're as devout, if not more devout, than they ever were back in their home countries. And they now have the benefit of an education that they didn't have. So they've all been to school, which they didn't do. Many of them to, completing high school, senior high school, university, that sort of thing, all courtesy and at the expense of the white Western taxpayers. But has this reduced the fervor and the intense observance of the faith? Well, if it has, I can't see it. I would suggest they're as devout and as committed to the faith as they ever were, and that they see themselves as an enclave within a godless, evil Christian society, and that their job is to invade and convert rather than to become good globalist citizens. In fact, the reverse would appear to be the case. So in reality, they're achieving nothing, producing nothing, and creating nothing. And the part of this plan that was to de-radicalize them or have them as turn them into faithless individuals, that's failed. In fact, it's got to be one of the most stunning failures in modern history, and thus a stunning miscalculation. So where is this going? Well, the purpose of the Islamic hordes in the West now is to be used as a device to crush, undermine, and subvert the Western white citizens. They become useful, and we see the astonishing things in Britain where Muslim gangs can roam around the streets with knives and baseball bats, and the police do nothing. Stand and watch them walk by. The police do nothing. And yet, when any white people get up and wave the Union Jack or the English flag, the police are out in force instantly. Suddenly, all the resources necessary are available. And I like watching that fucking moron Keir Starmer, that little globalist stooge gobble boy, saying, "No, there's no two-tier policing." What a fucking idiot! So now I'd forgotten all about that thing on the airplane or the plane. I can't remember where I was going in the States, but that came back to me, and whether or not it ever became part of the Western, as in the globalist plan, or not, but I can't see the purpose benefit to anybody of importing large numbers of Muslims into the West. I don't. No one can explain to me what the benefit is. No one can point to, well, look, there's the benefit. They're highly productive people that integrate it. No, there's no benefit that I can see. None that anyone's been able to explain. So they've become now a violent fifth column that is actually used by the white government, the uniparty globalist controlled government. So the globalists, and remember, the globalists control all the Western governments now, is being used simply to crush and subvert white Western society, destroy its history, and to be part of the militancy being used to oppress the white indigenous citizens of the West. It's quite remarkable, actually. But maybe the Muslims have been repurposed. Well, we can't de-radicalize them, so we'll use their radicalization as a weapon against the white people. Hey, yeah, wow, let's do that. I'm seriously thinking maybe that's what's going on here. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.